Welcome, you curious minds, to another deep dive.
Good to be back.
Today, we've got an absolutely packed set of sources. We're going on a bit of a whirlwind tour, really, of the globe's most pressing headlines, and some surprising ones, too.
Yeah, the range is pretty remarkable this time. We're touching on everything from high-stakes diplomacy, the geopolitical chess games,
Right.
all the way to cutting-edge science and tech breakthroughs, and, of course, the human stories behind it all in sports, culture, even some difficult topics.
Exactly. We're going to try and unpack a lot of information for you. From those halls of power where these big dramas are unfolding to the labs where the future's being built, and, yeah, even the tragic and the triumphant moments.
Indeed. And our mission today, as always, is to distill the most important nuggets of knowledge from all this information. We want to explore the underlying implications, connect the dots, see how, say, an economic decision over here ripples through international relations over there.
Or how a new technology sparks ethical questions we didn't even know we needed to ask.
Precisely. And always keeping an eye on that ever-present human element in global affairs. It's what ties it all together, really.
Couldn't agree more. So whether you're prepping for a big meeting, maybe just catching up on the world on your commute, or like us, you're just insanely curious about what makes the world tick.
Which hopefully you are, if you're tuning in.
Yeah, exactly. Get ready for a shortcut to being truly well-informed. We've got some surprising facts lined up, maybe just enough humor to keep you hooked along the way.
Let's do it.
All right, let's dive in. Okay, first up, let's unpack this major development on the global trade front. President Trump has announced what he's calling a massive, his word, trade deal with Japan.
After quite a bit of negotiation, apparently. 8 rounds of talks, the reports say.
8 rounds, and the core of it includes a 15% tariff on Japanese imports. What really jumped out, though, was the immediate market reaction.
Right, Japanese auto stocks surged. Toyota specifically saw a huge jump, 11 to 15%?
Yeah, something like that. Almost instantly.
Yeah.
It's like the market breathed a sigh of relief or maybe saw a clear path forward after a lot of uncertainty in that sector.
Well, and connecting this to the bigger picture, the framing around this deal is interesting. It's being presented as averting a worst-case scenario for the global economy. Avoiding a potential spiraling trade war, which many analysts were genuinely worried about.
Okay, so a stabilizing move, potentially.
Potentially, yes, in this specific U.S.-Japan corridor. But it also reflects a significant shift in global trade dynamics. This is very much in line with the Trump administration's preference for bilateral deals over those big multilateral frameworks like the World Trade Organization, the WTO.
Right, moving away from those established systems.
Exactly. It could be setting the outlines for a new kind of Trump-engineered trade landscape based more on direct negotiation and, frankly, leverage, which raises an important question.
What are the wider implications?
Precisely. What does this mean for international trade overall? Especially when you consider, for example, that European Union leaders are apparently bracing for a, let's say, frosty summit with China.
And both the EU and China are also targets of Trump's tariffs, aren't they?
They are. So this deal with Japan might solve one piece of the puzzle, but it simultaneously puts pressure elsewhere. And these tariffs have real-world consequences. We're seeing reports like from General Motors.
GM, what's happening there?
They reported a massive $1.1 billion negative impact directly from tariffs. Billion, with a B, contributed to a big slump in their quarterly profit, something like 35%.
Wow. So while this Japan deal might look good for Toyota right now, companies like GM are still feeling the heat from the broader tariff situation.
Exactly. It shows how interconnected yet fragmented the global trade landscape is right now. It's incredibly complex, constantly shifting. This Japan deal is a major data point, but it's far from the whole story.
It certainly seems to be creating ripples, and staying with Japan for a moment, their own internal political situation is, well, it's also seeing some significant shifts. That could make navigating these new international waters even trickier for them, couldn't it?
Absolutely. The domestic political stability, or lack thereof, is a crucial factor in how any country can project power or negotiate effectively on the world stage.
So what's the latest there? Our sources were indicating that Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba was actually set to resign. This followed a pretty major election defeat for his party, the Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP.
It wasn't just any loss. Reports called it a historic defeat. And it came alongside rising support for anti-establishment parties. Even a far-right Japanese First Party seems to be making gains, particularly among younger voters, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So the initial expectation was resignation, possibly adding more instability.
That was the chatter, yes. Some reports suggested he might step down quite soon. But the latest information we have suggests a change, of course. Prime Minister Yoshiba has apparently vowed publicly to stay in office despite that historic loss.
Oh, really? So he's digging in.
Seems like it. He's framing his decision around his commitment to implementing this new tariff deal with the United States. He's emphasizing that it's crucial for Japan's national interests and economic cooperation.
So using the trade deal as a reason to stay, perhaps.
That seems to be the public justification, yes. But this situation really throws Japan's increased political instability into sharp relief. The ruling coalition, Ipsu's coalition, now lacks a majority in both houses of parliament.
That makes governing incredibly difficult, surely. Passing laws, making decisions.
Extremely difficult. It requires constant negotiation, compromise, and leaves the government vulnerable. So the important question becomes, how will this internal political struggle, this instability, impact Japan's ability to actually navigate these new trade agreements effectively?
Yeah.
How does it affect their standing internationally, especially with all these other alliances shifting around them?
Right. Can they present a united front externally when things are so shaky internally?
That's the core challenge for Tokyo right now. It's a very precarious balancing act.
And Japan isn't the only one reevaluating things. We're seeing other countries making some pretty significant moves on this geopolitical chessboard, like Australia.
Yes. News out of Canberra.
They've apparently refused to commit to assisting the United States militarily if the U.S. were to go to war with China over Taiwan. That feels huge, given Australia's history.
It is huge. Australia has traditionally been one of America's closest and most reliable allies, especially in the Pacific. Think about the ANZ-US Treaty, the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. This is a significant departure, or at least a significant hesitation.
So what's behind it?
Well, what's fascinating is how Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's decision, or rather his refusal to give President Trump that reassurance, seems to highlight growing concerns, not just in Australia, but perhaps elsewhere too, about the current U.S. administration's foreign policy approach. Its predictability, maybe?
A bit of uncertainty about where the U.S. might lead.
Perhaps. And it strongly underscores Australia's focus on its own sovereignty and, crucially, its economic stability. Australia walks a very fine line, a strong security alliance with the U.S., but also a massive, vital economic relationship with China.
Right. China is a huge trading partner for them. Iron ore, coal.
Exactly.
Right.
So any military conflict in the region, especially over Taiwan, would be potentially catastrophic for the Australian economy. This move, if you connect it to the bigger picture, is a really strong indicator of countries wanting more independence in defining their alliances.
Not just automatically falling in line.
Precisely. Reacting to what they might perceive as, well, erratic foreign policy from major powers, perhaps, or simply prioritizing their own national interests and stability in a world that feels increasingly uncertain. It's a global trend, arguably.
Meanwhile, as some alliances seem to be fraying or shifting, Russia is actively making moves to expand its influence, particularly in Africa.
Yes, that's been a consistent theme. They've now approved a draft law to ratify a military cooperation agreement with Togo in West Africa.
Togo. Okay, and what does that involve?
The focus seems to be on joint military training, conducting exercises together, and providing medical support. It's framed as deepening defense ties.
And why Togo specifically?
Well, it's part of a broader push by Moscow into West Africa, particularly in areas where French influence, the traditional colonial power in many of those nations, has been waning significantly in recent years. There's a vacuum, and Russia seems eager to fill it.
Providing security assistance where maybe others aren't or aren't welcome anymore.
That appears to be the strategy. Several African countries facing instability, militant groups, jihadist insurgencies, they're turning to Moscow for security support, equipment, training, sometimes even private military contractors. Togo holds strategic importance to coastal access, its location in a volatile region.
So Russia expanding its footprint in Africa. At the same time, tensions are escalating closer to home for them, specifically with Poland.
Dramatically so. Moscow has now officially designated Poland as a hostile state.
Wow, hostile. That's strong language. What triggered that?
It's seen as a direct response to a series of factors, Poland imposing its own economic sanctions on Russia, but also perhaps more significantly, Poland's very strong, very vocal political and military support for Ukraine throughout the conflict.
Poland has been a major conduit for aid to Ukraine.
A crucial one. And this hostile designation isn't just symbolic. Poland's foreign ministry has now advised its own nationals to leave Russia immediately.
Because relations are deteriorating that fast.
Apparently so. They're citing rapidly worsening relations, severe restrictions being placed on Polish diplomatic missions within Russia, and even impacts on trade, making travel options extremely limited and the environment potentially unsafe for Polish citizens. This is a serious breakdown.
And the energy front is showing another interesting, maybe counterintuitive dynamic involving Russia. Slovakia's main natural gas company, SPP.
Slovenský plynárenský priemysel, yes.
Right, thank you. They plan to rely on Russia for, get this, 100% of their gas supplies.
100%.
Despite the EU's big plan to phase out all Russian energy imports by 2027. How does that work?
Well, the reported reason is simple: cost benefits. Apparently, Russian gas is significantly cheaper for Slovakia right now than alternatives.
So economics trumping geopolitics in this case.
It certainly seems that way, and it definitely raises big questions about the EU's overall energy strategy and its internal coherence. Can the bloc stick together on these major strategic goals?
Especially when individual members see a direct economic advantage in breaking ranks.
Exactly. And the Slovak Prime Minister, Robert Fico, hasn't minced words. He's publicly called the EU's phase-out plan imbecilic.
Imbecilic. Okay, strong words again.
Very strong. He's expressing deep concerns about the impact on Slovakia's energy security, its economic competitiveness. His argument is that relying on alternative supply routes, probably involving LNG imports or different pipelines, would inevitably mean much higher transit costs.
Which would hit Slovak consumers and businesses hard.
That's the fear, creating substantial price disparities. So this whole situation just highlights the incredible complexities of European energy policy right now, caught between these big geopolitical realignments, the desire for energy independence from Russia, and the immediate economic realities faced by member states.
A real tension there, a fundamental tension that the EU is clearly still grappling with. All right, let's switch gears now and look at some major domestic headlines, starting with the story that just continues to generate, well, explosive headlines. The Jeffrey Epstein fallout.
Yes, this story seems far from over.
The latest is that the Department of Justice, the DOJ, has reached out to Ghislaine Maxwell. She's the longtime Epstein associate, currently incarcerated.
Right. They're seeking a meeting with her, reportedly as part of the ongoing investigation into Epstein's network, which many believe extended far beyond just him and Maxwell.
But here's where things get really compelling, politically speaking. The House of Representatives, they actually fled Washington. Packed up early.
That's the report, yes. Amidst what's described as escalating turmoil surrounding the handling of Epstein-related files. It's quite extraordinary.
What kind of turmoil are we talking about?
Well, it seems there were intense disputes over how these sensitive files should be handled, who should have access, combined with persistent requests for interviews with key figures, Maxwell obviously being one. The tensions apparently got so high within the House, particularly among Republicans, that votes were canceled, and they took an unusually early summer break.
Birds left town.
Essentially, yes. Which really reflects the gravity of the situation and the extremely contentious discussions happening behind closed doors about this investigation and its potential implications, possibly for powerful people.
And President Trump has weighed in on this.
He has, though perhaps not in the way you might expect. When asked about the Epstein probe, he's attempted to deflect by accusing former President Obama of treason.
Treason? Based on what?
The claim seems to be related to alleged plots to rig elections. But it comes across to many observers as a pretty blatant distraction tactic, especially since, as many reports point out, a lot of the documents related to the Epstein case have actually been publicly available for years through previous lawsuits and investigations.
So his claims are complicated by existing public records.
Very much so. It raises serious concerns about the politicization of the justice system and attempts to use this incredibly sensitive case for political gain. It's a very charged, very messy situation.
Talk about an audacious distraction tactic indeed. And the Justice Department seems to have its own internal battles brewing as well, particularly around key appointments.
Yes, specifically in New Jersey, in the United States.
Right. We're seeing a real showdown over the top federal prosecutor job there, the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. The DOJ took the highly unusual step of firing the newly appointed U.S. Attorney, Alina Habba.
Fired her almost immediately after she was appointed.
And this happened after a group of federal judges in New Jersey, 17 of them, apparently voted against keeping her in the role. That's rare, isn't it, for judges to weigh in like that?
Extremely rare and very impactful. It sends a powerful message from the judiciary.
So what does this tell us?
Well, it immediately raises important questions about the independence of prosecutorial appointments. How much political influence should play a role versus, say, judicial assessment or established processes?
Because Hava was seen as a political appointee.
She has strong ties to President Trump, yes. The decision to remove her came very quickly after New Jersey state officials had initially chosen her over a different former Trump lawyer. But then Pam Bondi, who is herself a very staunch Trump ally holding a position within the DOJ framework, retortedly intervened and essentially overruled the judge's preference, leading to Hava's dismissal.
So a political tug-of-war over a key legal position.
Precisely. It reflects these ongoing, deep-seated tensions between political appointments administrations wanting people loyal to their agenda and key roles and the established judicial processes that are meant to prioritize impartiality, experience, and merit. It suggests a struggle over control within the federal justice system itself.
With potentially big implications for legal fairness and, frankly, public trust in the system.
Absolutely. Who gets prosecuted, how vigorously cases are pursued. The person in that U.S. attorney chair has enormous power.
Okay, let's move across the Atlantic now to Ukraine. Our sources indicate a really major and quite controversial story unfolding there.
Yes, concerning their anti-corruption efforts.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has signed a new law that significantly restricts the independence of key anti-corruption bodies. Specifically, we're talking about NOBU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau.
And SAPO, the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office.
Right. And these agencies are important, aren't they? They were set up with a lot of Western support specifically to tackle high-level corruption.
Crucially important. Established back in 2015, their independence was seen as absolutely vital for Ukraine's path towards, for example, European Union membership, and also for securing ongoing international financial aid. Tackling entrenched corruption was a key condition from partners.
And this new law is restricting that independence. How?
It essentially brings these previously independent agencies under tighter control of the executive branch under Zelensky's oversight.
And the reaction?
It sparked widespread protests across various Ukrainian cities. Demonstrators are expressing really deep concerns. In Kyiv, the capital, there are reports of chants like, "Zelensky is the devil," strong opposition.
Wow. And what about Ukraine's international partners, the ones who pushed for these agencies in the first place?
They're not happy either. Critics, including the G7 ambassadors, that's the group of 7 major industrialized nations and EU officials, they view this move as directly undermining Ukraine's progress on anti-corruption, which is crucial for EU membership aspirations. Some even suggest it could indirectly benefit Moscow's interests by weakening accountability within Ukraine at this critical time.
So the big question is, why is Zelensky doing this? Is this, as critics claim, an authoritarian move to consolidate power?
That's one interpretation, certainly, bringing these powerful investigative bodies under direct control.
Or is it, as he defends it, is it actually necessary? He's framing it as essential to streamline investigations and, interestingly, remove Russian influence from these bodies.
Right. That defense comes particularly after a recent highly publicized raid on the NABU offices and the arrest of a NABU employee accused of spying for Russia. Zelensky is using that incident to argue these reforms are needed for national security.
So cleaning house or consolidating power, it's a tough call from the outside.
It's incredibly complex. Western media is reacting strongly, with some outlets calling it playing with fire, really concerned about the potential damage to anti-corruption efforts and the signal it sends about democratic checks and balances, especially during wartime. You have very strong opinions on both sides.
Definitely a situation to watch closely, especially given the ongoing conflict and Ukraine's reliance on Western support. Okay, shifting gears again, this time to sports, but with some pretty significant societal implications. U.S. Olympic officials have made a decision regarding transgender athletes.
Yes, very controversial one. They've decided to bar transgender women from competing in women's competitions at the Olympics.
Bar them completely.
That's the announcement from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, the USOPC. They state it's in compliance with an executive order from President Trump titled, "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports."
Right. That executive order has been a focal point for this debate.
It has. And this decision immediately throws up these huge questions about inclusion, about equality, and about the intersection, maybe collision of politics and athletic competition.
It's stirred up a lot of debate, hasn't it? The balance between fairness, often cited as the reason for the ban.
Right. The argument often centers on perceived biological advantages and ensuring a level playing field for cisgender women.
Versus the participation and rights of transgender athletes and the principles of inclusion.
Exactly. You have very strong support for the decision from groups arguing for the protection of women's sports based on biological sex, and equally strong criticism from LGBTQ plus advocates and others who emphasize inclusion, non-discrimination, and respecting individual gender identity. It's a deeply divisive societal debate playing out on one of the world's biggest stages.
It really is, and it connects to broader cultural and political fault lines. Now, here's a fascinating international spat playing out in the digital realm. The U.S. State Department has accused the European Union of, wait for it, Orwellian censorship.
Orwellian censorship. That's not language you hear every day in diplomatic circles.
No, and is specifically aimed at the EU's online content regulations, particularly the Digital Services Act, or DSA.
The DSA, yes. That's the EU's major piece of legislation aimed at regulating online platforms, dealing with illegal content, disinformation, transparency in algorithms, and so on.
And the U.S. State Department's claim is that the DSA infringes on free speech, that it stifles dissenting voices.
That's the core accusation. They've even suggested, quite pointedly, that the DSA effectively protects European leaders from criticism from their own citizens by controlling the flow of information online.
Wow. So a direct challenge to the EU's approach to governing the internet.
A very direct challenge. What's fascinating here is this fundamental tension we're seeing globally between digital regulation and freedom of expression. Different democratic blocs have very different philosophies on that.
And how has the EU responded? France, perhaps?
France, in particular, has staunchly defended the DSA. They emphasize its importance in preventing the spread of illegal content, things like hate speech, terrorist propaganda, child sexual abuse material, and also in combating disinformation, especially in the context of elections and foreign interference concerns.
So they see it as necessary protection, while the U.S. sees it as censorship.
That's the crux of the disagreement. This situation really highlights this global debate. How do governments regulate these incredibly powerful online platforms to curb harm without overstepping and impinging on fundamental rights like freedom of speech? It's an incredibly delicate balancing act, and there are no easy answers. Different societies are drawing the line in different places.
On a related, though perhaps more severe note, Russia has taken steps regarding online content as well. They've introduced fines for individuals who even search for extremist content online.
Yes, this is part of Russia's ongoing and intensifying efforts to combat what the state defines as extremism and to heavily regulate all online activities within its borders.
Fines just for searching, not even sharing or posting.
That's the report. It reflects the government's tightening grip on internet access and content. It obviously raises huge concerns about freedom of speech, freedom of inquiry, online surveillance, and basic privacy for Russian citizens.
It seems like another step towards a more controlled information environment.
Absolutely. If you place this in the bigger picture, it's another clear example of a state implementing increasingly stringent measures to monitor and restrict online activities, directly impacting the ability of its citizens to access diverse information and express dissent.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? Russian MPs have taken another step regarding content.
They have. They voted recently to ban films, movies that are deemed to discredit or deny traditional values.
Traditional values, that sounds incredibly broad and potentially subjective.
It is very broad. And critics are genuinely concerned that this could affect even beloved classic Soviet-era movies if they contain themes or depictions that don't align with the current government's definition of traditional values. Artists and cultural observers are quite alarmed.
Is there an official reason given for this?
It's being explicitly linked in official statements to concerns over Russia's declining birth rates and part of broader government efforts to reinforce family institutions and promote a specific conservative national identity. They see certain cultural influences as undermining these goals.
So controlling culture to influence demographics and social norms.
That appears to be the objective, yes.
Sure.
A significant move with potentially far-reaching cultural consequences.
Let's turn our attention now to a situation that continues to be absolutely heartbreaking. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Yes, the reports remain incredibly grim.
We saw a significant and very rare visit recently by Holy Land clerics, people like the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Pier Battista Pizzaballa, and the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Theophilus III.
A very high-profile delegation making a joint visit to Gaza.
They went on July 18th, and their visit came shortly after an Israeli strike reportedly hit Gaza's only Catholic church, the Holy Family Church, tragically killing 3 people sheltering there.
A deeply shocking incident.
And the patriarchs returned from their visit saying they had broken hearts. They made this chilling observation that people were so starved, so traumatized, they didn't even react to the sounds of bombing anymore.
Numb to it. A horrifying thought.
And they explicitly condemned Israel's ongoing bombardment and the blockade of Gaza as morally unacceptable.
That condemnation carries significant weight coming from those figures. And the picture painted by aid groups on the ground is just stark, their warning of mass starvation.
Yeah, starvation in 2025.
With truly heart-wrenching reports coming out about severely malnourished children, families desperate for food, unable to find it. Tragically, some sources we reviewed report that over 800 Palestinians have lost their lives just trying to reach food distribution points.
How? What's happening at these points?
The reports allege they faced mass shootings by Israeli forces while trying to access aid. These are contested claims, of course, but they're coming from sources on the ground. It paints a picture of utter desperation and extreme danger, even when trying to get basic sustenance.
And accessing information is difficult too, isn't it? Foreign journalists are banned.
Largely, yes, making independent verification very challenging. Agence France-Presse, the AFP news agency, has actually called on Israel to allow the evacuation of its freelance Palestinian journalists from Gaza, citing appalling and untenable living conditions that make it impossible for them to work safely.
So even local journalists are trapped and struggling to report.
Exactly. And there's another deeply disturbing and controversial claim circulating in some of the source material that Israel is deliberately targeting women in Gaza.
Targeting women specifically. Why?
The claim is that the aim is to halt reproduction, to impact the future demographics of Gaza. Now, this is a highly inflammatory and serious accusation and needs to be treated with caution. But its presence in the discourse raises profound questions about the long-term societal impact of this conflict far beyond the immediate casualties.
It really underscores the urgent, desperate need for humanitarian aid, for access, and for some kind of cessation of hostilities.
Absolutely. The human cost is just staggering.
And this crisis, the conflict in Gaza, it's having ripple effects far beyond the region, even reaching university campuses in the United States. Columbia University in New York City, for instance.
Yes. Columbia has taken some very drastic actions recently.
They've moved against nearly 80 students who participated in anti-Israel protests on campus earlier this year. The penalties are severe: expulsion, suspension, even having their degrees revoked.
Degree revocation. That's a life-altering consequence.
Absolutely. The university cited violations of its policies regarding disruption of academic activities, but this is happening amidst intense negotiations between Columbia and the Trump administration.
Negotiations about what?
About restoring federal funding to the university. That funding had been threatened by the administration over concerns about alleged anti-Semitism on campus, often linked to these protests.
Ah, so there's a political and financial pressure element here as well.
It certainly seems plausible. And this whole situation forces us to confront these difficult questions around academic freedom versus freedom of speech on campus. Where is the line between protest and unacceptable disruption?
It's a line universities across the country are struggling to define right now, especially when the protests involve such deeply contentious issues like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
And we saw a specific case highlighting this tension. Mahmoud Khalil, one of the protest leaders at Columbia, was actually targeted for deportation.
Targeted for deportation. On what grounds?
Immigration officials, part of the Department of Homeland Security, portrayed his advocacy for Palestinians and free speech as anti-Jewish. They even labeled him a terrorist sympathizer, although reports say they haven't provided evidence to back that up. So linking his protest activity directly to terrorism sympathies.
That seems to be the allegation. However, he met with lawmakers in Washington, D.C. to make his case, and importantly, judges involved in his proceedings have reportedly defended his constitutional rights to freedom of speech.
So the courts are pushing back against the government's framing.
It appears so in this instance. It just highlights these deep political divisions in the U.S. right now and the ongoing debates over civil liberties, particularly how universities and the government should respond to campus activism, especially when it touches on sensitive foreign policy issues. It's a real legal and social minefield.
Definitely. A lot of complex layers there. Okay, let's pivot now to the digital frontier. Always moving fast. Apple's been busy rolling out the latest beta for its operating system. iOS 26 Beta 4.
Always tinkering, always updating.
This one brings what they're calling liquid glass tweaks. Sounds fancy. Any idea what that actually means?
Ah, yeah. The marketing names are always creative. It likely refers to subtle refinements in the visual design transparencies, animations, maybe how light reflects on interface elements, aiming for a smoother, more polished, perhaps more intuitive user interface, making things look and feel slicker.
Got it. And they're also upgrading those AI-powered news summaries. I find those pretty handy for getting up to speed quickly.
They can be, yeah. These updates are all geared towards refining the user experience, making information access more efficient, delivering curated content more effectively. It's about streamlining how we interact with our devices.
Making them even more central to how we get our news and information.
Absolutely. Tech companies are constantly enhancing that information access and engagement loop. And speaking of engagement, Threads, the social media platform from Meta.
Right, the competitor to Twitter.
They're introducing enhanced metrics for creators, giving them more detailed data on how their content is performing.
Like what kind of data?
More granular information on views, engagement, reach, and importantly, where people are discovering their content, whether it's from followers, search, recommendations. It helps creators understand their audience better and tailor their content more effectively, optimizing for the algorithm, essentially.
Makes sense. Giving creators the tools to grow their presence. Now, here's a tech development that sounds, well, both potentially amazing and slightly terrifying. Amazon has acquired a company called Bee.
Bee? Okay, what do they do?
They make an AI wearable device, like
Right.
something you wear on your person. And this device records and transcribes everything its user says all day long.
Everything, constantly recording.
That's the description. On the one hand, you can see the potential, right? Amazing voice recognition capabilities, a perfect personal assistant that captures every thought, every conversation, maybe helps people with memory issues.
The potential applications are significant, yes,
Yeah.
for accessibility, productivity.
But on the other hand, wow, the privacy implications are just enormous, aren't they? Constant recording, constant transcription. Who owns that data? Where does it go? How is it secured? How could it be misused?
Precisely. This acquisition fits perfectly into Amazon's broader strategy. They're heavily invested in AI, voice technology. Think Alexa and expanding into wearables makes sense for them. But it absolutely brings these profound ethical considerations about data collection and potential surveillance right to the forefront.
It feels like a major step towards a world of ubiquitous monitoring.
It certainly pushes the boundaries. We need serious public discussion about consent, data ownership, security protocols, and the potential for misuse of this kind of deeply personal, continuously collected information. It's not just about convenience, it's about fundamental privacy.
And this connects to a broader issue with AI, doesn't it? The sheer demand for AI is having unexpected consequences.
Yes. Particularly concerning energy consumption. The processing power required for training and running these large AI models is immense.
So all those data centers running AI, they're using a lot more electricity.
A lot more. We're seeing reports that the surging demand for AI is significantly increasing power usage right across the U.S., but it's particularly concentrated in those major data center hubs. Virginia is often cited as a key example.
And that increased demand, it affects electricity costs.
Directly. Reports suggest it's leading to about a 10% increase in cost for the power producers themselves. And that cost inevitably gets passed on. Projections are for up to a 5% rise in customer electricity bills, directly linked to AI's energy appetite.
Wow. So the AI revolution is literally making our lights more expensive.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
Yep.
And politically, this directly undermines President Trump's pledge to reduce energy costs for American consumers. He promised to cut household energy costs in half. The reality of AI's power demands makes that promise much harder to keep.
So AI is not only listening to us, potentially, but also making our electricity bills heavier. Talk about an unexpected side effect, indeed.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is. Technological advancement has real-world economic and infrastructural consequences. And staying with the theme of digital threats and consequences, we have a stark warning coming from Microsoft.
Microsoft. About what?
About Chinese hackers. They're reporting that state-sponsored or state-affiliated groups from China are actively exploiting vulnerabilities in widely used software. They specifically mentioned SharePoint, which is used by countless organizations for collaboration.
Exploiting known flaws.
Yes, flaws in common software to gain access to networks, leading to serious cyber intrusions across various sectors. And perhaps most alarmingly, the report indicated that the U.S. Nuclear Weapons Agency was reportedly breached in some of these attacks.
The Nuclear Weapons Agency, that's incredibly serious.
Extremely serious. It underscores the severity of the threat and the critical importance of national cybersecurity, especially for sensitive infrastructure. This really forces us to consider this constant high-stakes race between cyber attackers and defenders on the global stage.
It highlights the need for robust defenses, constant vigilance, rapid patching of vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. The consequences of failure can be catastrophic.
Okay, let's balance that with some more positive tech news. PayPal is making moves in cross-border payments.
Yes, they're partnering up with various global fintech companies, financial technology companies. The goal is to make sending money internationally much easier by integrating with different international mobile wallet systems.
So connecting different payment apps across borders.
Essentially, yes. Breaking down those barriers. Their stated aim is ambitious, to reach about 2 billion people worldwide with these smoother cross-border payment options. That could be huge for remittances, international e-commerce, and just connecting people financially.
That sounds genuinely useful. And in the medical tech world, there's news about a potentially revolutionary drug.
Yes, described as anti-necrotics. It's currently in clinical trials.
Anti-necrotics, what does it do?
Necrosis is uncontrolled cell death, often triggered by injury or disease. These drugs apparently work to prevent that uncontrolled death cascade. The potential implication is that they could revolutionize the treatment of aging itself.
How so?
Because uncontrolled cell death is a major factor in many age-related issues. Organ damage, various diseases. If you can control or prevent that, you could potentially slow down aspects of the aging process or treat age-related conditions much more effectively. It's early days, clinical trials, but the potential is immense.
Wow. Extending healthy lifespan, potentially. That's groundbreaking if it pans out. And even more futuristic sounding. Fusion energy. Avalanche energy.
Yes, a Seattle-based company working on fusion power. They've apparently hit a key milestone towards their goal of a desktop fusion reactor, which sounds like science fiction.
Desktop fusion? Seriously, how?
Their approach is different from the giant tokamak reactors you usually hear about, but the milestone is that they've successfully operated their prototype machine for hours at a time, sustaining plasma at an incredible 300,000 volts.
That's a significant step in demonstrating stability and control, presumably.
Exactly. Still a long way from a commercial desktop reactor, obviously, but a crucial proof-of-concept step on that very ambitious road towards clean, compact fusion power. And speaking of advanced computing, there's been a breakthrough in the world of quantum computers.
Quantum computing still feels like magic to me sometimes. What's the breakthrough?
Well, they've finally managed to successfully implement something called magic state distillation.
Magic state distillation. Okay, you're going to have to unpack that one for us.
Huh. Yeah, the name is evocative. Basically, think of the fundamental building blocks of a quantum computer. The qubits. They're incredibly powerful, but also inherently fragile and prone to errors or noise, like trying to do calculations with slightly fuzzy numbers.
Okay, so they're not perfectly reliable.
Exactly. Magic state distillation is essentially a sophisticated error correction technique. It's a way to take these noisy, imperfect quantum states and purify them, distilling them down into much more accurate high-fidelity states, the magic states that can be used for computation more reliably.
So it's like cleaning up the signal, making the qubits more stable and trustworthy for calculations.
That's a great way to put it. It's absolutely crucial for building what are called fault-tolerant quantum computers, machines that can perform really complex calculations over long periods without being derailed by these inherent quantum errors.
And achieving this distillation, that's a big deal.
It's considered a major milestone. It's one of the key theoretical ingredients needed to unlock the true potential of large-scale quantum computing. This success potentially marks a significant acceleration point in the field.
Which raises that important question again. How will this kind of accelerated technological progress reshape industries? What problems could we solve with truly powerful, fault-tolerant quantum computers?
Exactly. We're talking potential revolutions in areas like drug discovery, materials science, financial modeling, cryptography, climate change research. Problems that are currently far too complex for even the most powerful classical supercomputers. The potential is truly staggering.
Mind-boggling stuff. The digital frontier just keeps pushing outwards. All right, let's shift our gaze upwards now to space. And it's always great to start with the next generation, isn't it? NASA's Suits Challenge.
Yes, the Spacesuit User Interface Technologies for Human Exploration Challenge. Quite a mouthful.
Indeed. Over 100 students from 12 different universities participated recently down at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
And what were they doing? designing the next fashion line for astronauts.
Ha, close. They were showcasing innovative user interface designs. Think heads-up displays, control systems, ways for astronauts to interact with their suits and with rovers when they're on, say, the moon or Mars.
Ah, so the practical tech inside the suit, how astronauts get information and control things.
Exactly. They tested their designs in simulated moon and Mars environments. It really reflects NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration's commitment to fostering those STEM skills, right? Science, technology, engineering, math.
Absolutely. And providing these invaluable real-world application opportunities, these students aren't just learning theory, they're potentially contributing directly to future missions, designing systems that might actually be used by astronauts someday.
It's preparing them for careers in space exploration and contributing directly to advancing our capabilities. Pretty cool.
Very cool. Speaking of advancing capabilities, NASA had a mission plan called TRACERS.
Tracers, what's that one about?
It stands for Two Wide-Angle Imaging Neutral Atom Spectrometers. The goal is to study Earth's upper atmosphere, the ionosphere, specifically how it interacts with the solar wind, particularly near the poles where auroras happen.
Okay, understanding space weather near Earth.
Precisely. And a key aim is to enhance our ability to forecast solar storms. Those storms can have major impacts on satellites, communication systems, even power grids down here on Earth.
Right, so better forecasting is crucial. Did the mission launch?
Unfortunately, no, it was scrubbed at the last minute.
Ah, what happened? Technical issues.
The reasons given were actually airspace concerns, cited by the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and also a regional power outage near the launch site.
A power outage scrubbed a rocket launch. Oh, the irony.
Yes, seems like a case of terrestrial problems interfering with celestial ambitions. A bit of a hiccup, but presumably they'll reschedule. Improving solar storm forecasting remains a really important goal for protecting our increasingly tech-dependent society.
Definitely. You don't want a major solar storm taking out GPS or power grids without warning. Okay, let's bring our focus back down to Earth, specifically to our planet's health and the climate crisis. There's a really significant development happening at the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, in The Hague.
Yes, this is potentially huge. The ICJ is set to deliver its first ever advisory opinion specifically on climate change.
Its first ever on this topic. That feels overdue, maybe.
Many would argue so. It's being hailed as a historic moment in international law. And significantly, the court has already declared, in the context of this case, that climate change represents an existential threat.
An existential threat acknowledged by the world's highest court. What prompted this? Who brought the case?
The request for the advisory opinion came from the United Nations General Assembly, but it was spearheaded by the small Pacific island nation of Vanuatu.
Vanuatu, one of the nations on the absolute front lines of climate change impacts like sea level rise.
Exactly. They, along with other vulnerable nations, pushed hard for this. And the resulting opinion is expected to emphasize nations' legal obligations under international law to prevent climate change.
Obligations. What kind of obligations?
Obligations to reduce emissions, to protect the climate system, potentially to cooperate internationally. And crucially, it's expected to address the issue of holding polluters accountable.
Accountable how? Legally? Financially?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question. The opinion is likely to call for integrating human rights law and international environmental law when tackling climate action, recognizing the disproportionate harm faced by vulnerable populations. This could open the door for significant legal consequences for major contributing countries, the biggest historical emitters.
So lawsuits against polluting nations based on this ICJ opinion?
Potentially. It could provide a powerful legal basis for such claims.
Mm-hmm.
And it might also bolster calls for reparations, payments from polluting nations to vulnerable nations to compensate for the loss and damage already caused by climate change.
Wow, this could really reshape the international legal landscape around climate change.
It has that potential, yes.
Yeah.
A very significant development to watch.
And while that high-level legal battle unfolds, we're seeing more localized environmental conflicts too, like in the Baltic Sea, near the German-Polish border.
Yes, there's concern brewing there. Poland has plans to develop a newly discovered oil and gas field called the Woolen East Deposit, which lies quite close to the maritime border with Germany.
Oil and gas development in the Baltic. What are the concerns?
German officials and environmental groups are expressing significant worries about the potential environmental impact. They're concerned about damage from drilling activities, noise pollution, vibrations, potential spills, all of which could harm the sensitive marine ecosystems in that area.
And impact things like tourism and nature reserves nearby.
Exactly. There are important nature reserves and tourist destinations on the German side of the border that could be affected. But from Poland's perspective,
They see it as vital for energy independence.
precisely, especially now, with the EU trying to reduce reliance on Russian energy. Discovering a domestic source of oil and gas is seen as strategically important and economically beneficial for Poland.
So it's that classic dilemma again, national economic need and energy security versus cross-border environmental protection and conservation.
A very clear example of it, playing out between two EU neighbors. It highlights the challenges of managing shared resources and balancing national interests with collective environmental goals.
No easy answers there either. And speaking of environmental forces, we need to touch on the current tropical weather situation, particularly impacting Asia.
Yes, it's been an active period. We're currently tracking 3 distinct tropical storms causing impacts across several regions.
3 at once. Okay, break them down for us.
Right. First, there's Tropical Storm 1125. It's primarily affecting the Philippines and Japan. Maximum sustained wind speeds were reported around 111 kilometers per hour. That's generating heavy rain right now, with moderate rain expected to continue over the next 24 hours.
Okay, Philippines and Japan. What's next?
Then there's Tropical Storm Francisco 25. This one is impacting Japan as well, but also Taiwan and parts of China. Its maximum winds are slightly lower, around 83 kilometers per hour, but it's also bringing in heavy rainfall, again with moderate rain forecast for the next day.
Japan, Taiwan, China, and the third one.
That's Tropical Storm WIFT 25. This one is further west, bringing rain to China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. Its winds are currently weaker, around 65 kilometers per hour, under overcast skies, but forecasts predict moderate to heavy rainfall from this system too.
So a lot of rain across Southeast and East Asia from these 3 storms.
Yes, widespread heavy to moderate rain. It really emphasizes the ongoing importance of weather monitoring, preparedness, and safety measures for millions of people living in those regions during typhoon season.
Absolutely. Constant vigilance needed. Okay, let's shift focus to the world of business and economics. How are the markets looking? The S&P 500 in the U.S.
Generally positive, actually. The S&P 500, that's the Standard & Poor's 500 index, a key benchmark for the U.S. stock market, has been ticking higher recently. It even achieved a record close not long ago.
A record close. So investor sentiment is pretty bullish.
It seems that way. Investors appear to be digesting the latest corporate earnings reports relatively well. And perhaps that U.S.-Japan trade deal we discussed earlier provided a bit of a boost, easing some concerns.
But is it positive across the board, or is it a mixed picture?
It's definitely more of a mixed picture when you drill down. While the overall market index remains stable or rising, some specific companies are clearly feeling the pinch, particularly from those ongoing trade tensions and tariffs.
Like General Motors, which you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. GM stock took a significant hit. It fell sharply right after they reported that huge $1.1 billion negative impact directly attributed to tariffs.
And that contributed to a 35% slump in their quarterly profit.
Correct. It really highlights the very tangible bottom-line effects these trade policies are having on major industries. While the broader market might absorb it, individual companies, especially those heavily reliant on international supply chains and markets, can face substantial financial challenges.
So the rising tide isn't necessarily lifting all boats equally.
Not at all. It shows that even amidst overall market stability, specific sectors and companies can be quite vulnerable to these geopolitical and economic headwinds.
Now, here's a really interesting, maybe even shocking development from the financial sector, specifically in the UK. 2 city traders.
Tom Hayes and Carlo Palumbo.
Right. They were jailed years ago for manipulating key interest rates, LIBOR and Euribor.
LIBOR being the London Interbank offered rate, Euribor the Euro Interbank offered rate. These were incredibly important benchmark rates that influence the cost of borrowing globally for trillions of dollars worth of financial products, from mortgages to complex derivatives.
So manipulating them was a huge scandal at the time. Big prison sentences.
Massive scandal, seen as a major crackdown on financial misconduct after the 2008 crisis. Hayes got 11 years initially, Palumbo 4.
But now, their convictions have been quashed.
Overturned.
Completely quashed, yes. After a decade of claiming they were victims of miscarriages of justice, appealing through the courts, the UK's Criminal Cases Review Commission referred their cases back, and now the Court of Appeal has overturned the convictions.
Why? What was the basis for overturning them?
It seems to center on how the jury was directed during the original trials regarding what constituted dishonesty in the context of setting those rates. The legal arguments are complex, but essentially the appeal court found the convictions to be unsafe.
Wow. So after all this time, they walk free. What are the implications of this?
Well, it immediately raises very important questions about the reliability of those original judgments in these highly complex financial manipulation cases. Were they fundamentally flawed? And what does this mean for other similar convictions related to the LIBOR scandal?
Could it open the door for more appeals? It could potentially set a significant precedent, yes. It might force a reevaluation of how these kinds of financial crimes were prosecuted and whether other convictions from that era are also unsafe. It's a major development with potentially far-reaching consequences for the individuals involved, for the banks, and for the regulators who pursued these cases so vigorously.
A real twist in a long-running saga. Okay, here's an unexpected headline that speaks volumes about shifting global economic patterns. Russia has apparently overtaken Germany in beer production.
Overtaken Germany? The land of Reinheitsgebot and Oktoberfest. That's quite something.
Isn't it? For the first time ever, apparently, Russia has bumped Germany out of the top 5 global beer producers.
Wow. What fueled that? Did Russians suddenly start drinking a lot more beer?
Well, Russia's production did increase significantly by about 9%, reaching nearly 9.1 billion liters. But the bigger story seems to be on the import-export side, largely driven by the conflict in Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions.
So Western sanctions impacting beer.
It seems so. There was a dramatic decrease in beer imports into Russia because major Western brewers, many of them German or European, pulled out of the Russian market or significantly scaled back operations there.
Creating a vacuum in the domestic market.
Exactly, which boosted demand for domestically produced Russian beer. And conversely, Russia has actually expanded its beer exports, finding new markets, particularly in Asia and Africa.
Interesting. So sanctions inadvertently boosted local production and opened new export avenues for Russian brewers. Meanwhile, German beer production has been falling.
Yes, Germany's been facing declining beer consumption for a while due to several factors: an aging population, maybe more competition from other drinks, potentially reduced purchasing power for consumers, and rising production costs for brewers hitting their margins.
A confluence of factors pushing German production down while Russian production surged due to unique geopolitical circumstances. A fascinating snapshot of economic shifts.
It really is, but it's not all good news for the Russian economy. While the beer sector might be bubbling, the construction sector is facing serious problems.
Ooh, what's happening there? Reports suggest mass bankruptcies are threatening the civil construction sector. High borrowing costs, interest rates making loans expensive, combined with shrinking demand for new projects, are putting immense pressure on these firms.
How widespread is the problem?
Some estimates suggest about half of the civil construction firms in Russia could be at risk. That's a huge potential impact on jobs and economic activity. So even within the same national economy, you have vastly different fortunes depending on the sector and how it's affected by global events, sanctions, and domestic policies like interest rates.
It really highlights the complexity, doesn't it? And raises questions about the overall resilience and diversification of an economy facing these kinds of pressures. You can't just look at one industry.
Absolutely not. You need the full picture.
All right, let's move into our final block of stories, focusing on societal significance, health, justice, culture, and more. First up, a difficult story from the pharmaceutical world involving Sarepta Therapeutics.
Yes, concerning their therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Right. Duchenne is a severe, progressive muscle-wasting disease primarily affecting young boys. Sarepta has treatments, but one of them is facing what's described as an arduous path back to full market approval.
Arduous suggests significant hurdles. What's the issue?
Well, a senior official at the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, the U.S. regulatory body, has indicated challenges. And here's the really contentious part. The FDA has apparently requested that Sarepta withdraw one of its treatments because it's been linked to patient deaths.
Withdraw the drug due to safety concerns linked to deaths. That's serious.
Extremely serious. But Sarepta is reportedly refusing the FDA's request. They're pushing back.
Refusing an FDA withdrawal request for a drug linked to fatalities. That's a bold and potentially risky stance for a drug maker to take.
It really is. It forces us to confront that incredibly difficult balance between pharmaceutical innovation, the desperate need for treatments for devastating diseases like Duchenne, where options are limited, and the absolute necessity of ensuring patient safety.
Especially when a powerful regulatory body like the FDA raises alarms based on safety data. The tension between wanting to provide hope and access versus the duty to protect patients from harm is immense in cases like this. It puts the FDA in a tough position, too.
A very difficult situation with potentially life or death stakes.
On a completely different note, but also related to health and safety, there's an interesting development in material science that could help combat a pervasive problem: drink spiking.
Drink spiking. How can material science help there?
Researchers are exploring the use of a temporary tattoo, something you could perhaps apply to your skin that acts as a secret indicator.
A secret indicator? How would it work?
The idea is that the material in the tattoo would react chemically if it comes into contact with common date rape drugs, or perhaps even just excessive alcohol transferred from a spiked drink, maybe via a finger touching the tattoo after touching the drink. It could change color or provide some other discrete visual cue.
Wow, a personal wearable detector. That sounds like a truly innovative application of technology for personal safety, especially for people in social settings like parties or bars.
Exactly. Providing a quick, discreet way to potentially check if a drink has been tampered with. It's still in the development phase, of course, but it's a fascinating example of science being applied to address a serious real-world safety concern.
Definitely one to watch. That can make a real difference for people's safety and peace of mind.
Now, shifting geographically and to a deeply concerning social trend, student suicides in India.
Oh, dear. What are the numbers showing?
The statistics are alarming. Student suicides now reportedly account for 7.6% of all suicide deaths in India. That's a significant and tragic proportion.
7.6% of the country's total among students. Why? What are the driving factors?
It appears to be a complex mix of factors. Intense academic pressure is frequently cited. The competition for university places and jobs is incredibly fierce. High parental expectations to succeed also play a major role. Underlying mental health issues are often involved, and these may not be adequately addressed.
And the pandemic made things worse.
It's significantly worse, according to experts.
Yeah.
The isolation of online classes during COVID-19 lockdowns, the disruption to social lives, the added stress and uncertainty all seem to have exacerbated the existing pressures on students.
This just highlights a critical, urgent need, doesn't it, for better mental health support systems within schools and universities.
Absolutely. More accessible counseling, mental health awareness programs.
And maybe broader academic reforms to reduce some of that relentless pressure, plus just more open, destigmatized conversations about mental well-being.
Precisely. It's a multifaceted crisis that requires a multifaceted response from educational institutions, families, government, and society as a whole to protect the well-being of India's young people.
A truly sobering situation. Let's turn now to a powerful statement made recently on the international stage regarding cultural heritage and historical justice. Mozambican Foreign Minister Maria Manuela Lucas made some strong points.
Yes, addressing the ongoing debate about the repatriation of African cultural artifacts from Western museums.
But she went beyond just the artifacts, didn't she? She stressed that Africa needs to reclaim not only its stolen cultural heritage, but also its dignity, its independence, and its true economic agency from the legacies of Western colonial powers.
Exactly. She framed it as a much broader issue than just museum pieces. She emphasized the need for fundamental, structural reforms to address these deep-seated historical injustices, moving beyond symbolic gestures like returning a few artifacts.
Towards actual economic empowerment.
Yes. She highlighted the critical importance of African nations shifting away from economies based primarily on exporting raw materials, a legacy of colonialism towards developing domestic industries, adding value locally, and achieving genuine economic independence and self-determination.
This connects to the wider reparations movement, doesn't it?
Very much so. The African Union itself has declared 2025 as the year of reparations, which underlines the growing continental push to address these historical wrongs comprehensively, culturally, politically, and economically.
It raises that fundamental question again about accountability for historical wrongs. What do former colonial powers owe their former colonies, and what does a truly equitable path forward look like?
These are precisely the difficult, essential questions being pushed onto the global agenda. It's about reshaping relationships based on mutual respect and addressing the tangible, ongoing consequences of the colonial era.
A conversation that's clearly gaining momentum. Okay, on a completely different note now, but one that has touched millions around the world. The passing of a true music icon, Ozzy Osbourne.
Ah, yes. The Prince of Darkness. Sad news indeed.
The charismatic frontman of Black Sabbath, often called the godfather of heavy metal, has passed away at the age of 76 in the UK.
76. A long and certainly eventful life.
Absolutely. No specific cause of death was immediately given in the reports, but it's well known he'd been dealing with significant health issues for years. He was very open about his diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, and he had complications from a serious fall back in 2019.
He certainly faced his share of health battles in recent years.
And, poignantly, his final onstage appearance was reportedly a reunion with Black Sabbath just weeks before his death, a final farewell with the band that made him famous.
What a way to cap off a legendary career. And the reaction to his passing. It's been immense, hasn't it?
Truly immense. A massive outpouring of global tributes. From his family, of course, but also from fellow music legends, his Black Sabbath bandmate, Tony Iommi, Elton John, members of Metallica, Robert Plant. The list goes on. Everyone acknowledging his huge impact.
And what was that impact? What made Ozzy so iconic?
Well, there was that unique, instantly recognizable voice, wasn't there? And his absolutely magnetic, often outrageous stage presence. You mentioned the Prince of Darkness persona. And who can forget the infamous bat incident?
Yes, biting the head off a bat on stage. Whether accidental or not, it certainly cemented his wild image.
It did. But beyond the rock and roll theatrics, he had this surprising second act with reality television, didn't he? The Osbourne show introduced him to a whole new generation in a completely different way.
It really did. Showed a surprisingly relatable, if chaotic, family life behind the heavy metal image. And his philanthropic side shouldn't be overlooked either. That farewell show reportedly raising $190 million for charity. That's incredible.
Absolutely. And he even did bizarre things like selling his DNA sequence on collectible tea cans. Always unpredictable.
He truly defied categorization, didn't he?
Yeah.
Embraced this wild, authentic, sometimes contradictory persona. It makes you think about the lasting cultural impact of artists like that, the ones who break the mold and leave such an indelible mark.
He truly was one of a kind. As many have said, there will never be another Ozzy.
Agreed. A true original.
Okay, moving back to more sobering news now. A disturbing report emerging from Syria.
Yes, concerning the city of Soweto, which has seen significant unrest and clashes recently.
That the BBC is reporting claims of a massacre at Soweto's National Hospital. Hospital staff are alleging that patients were killed inside the hospital by Syrian government forces during recent operations in the city.
Patients killed in their beds.
One staff member was quoted chillingly saying exactly that. They shot patients in beds. If true, this is horrific.
Horrific and a potential war crime. Hospitals and medical facilities, along with patients and staff, are explicitly protected under international humanitarian law. Deliberately targeting them is a grave violation. This immediately raises crucial questions about accountability during conflict. Will there be investigations? Can those responsible be identified and brought to justice?
Protecting civilians and medical facilities in wartime is fundamental. These allegations demand serious attention.
Absolutely.
In other crime-related news, but on a more international scale, we're seeing how global cooperation works through Interpol.
Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization, yes. Their red notice system is a key tool.
And their database currently includes dozens of Caribbean nationals who are wanted internationally for a range of serious crimes.
What kind of crimes are we talking about?
It's quite varied. Examples cited include someone wanted for causing death by dangerous driving in Jamaica, individuals involved in complex money laundering schemes stretching from Cuba to Brazil. It really highlights the transnational nature of crime today.
It certainly does. Criminals don't respect borders, so law enforcement cooperation across borders is essential. Interpol's red notices facilitate that, alerting police worldwide about wanted fugitives.
It shows the global reach of criminal activity and the necessity of that coordinated international response to track down suspects.
A vital, if often unseen, aspect of global security.
And closer to home for UK listeners, the UK Home Office has announced a new data sharing agreement that's raising some eyebrows.
Oh, data sharing with whom?
They plan to share data from asylum hotels, information about asylum seekers residing in government-provided accommodation with private food delivery firms, like Deliveroo or Uber Eats.
Sharing asylum seeker data with food delivery companies. Why? What's the rationale?
The stated aim is to identify migrants residing in these hotels who may be working illegally, perhaps as delivery drivers for these firms, in breach of their asylum conditions.
So using delivery company employment records to cross-reference against asylum seeker data to detect unauthorized work.
That seems to be the idea, but quite obviously it has sparked immediate and widespread privacy concerns.
You can see why. Sharing potentially sensitive personal data about a vulnerable population with private companies for immigration enforcement purposes, that raises huge red flags for civil liberties groups. Concerns about data security,
Yeah.
potential misuse, profiling, discrimination.
Exactly. The Home Office frames this as part of its broader effort to clamp down on illegal working and impose sanctions on suspected criminals, including groups potentially linked to people smuggling, particularly those involved in the small boat crossings over the English Channel.
So it's tied into that larger, highly politicized issue of channel crossings and illegal immigration.
It appears so, but it forces that difficult question again. What is the right balance between national security objectives, immigration enforcement, and the fundamental privacy rights of individuals, especially vulnerable individuals like asylum seekers?
It's a debate playing out in many countries. How far should the state go in collecting and sharing data for enforcement purposes, and what safeguards are needed to protect against abuse and protect fundamental rights? This specific agreement is likely to face significant scrutiny and possibly legal challenges.
Definitely a contentious move. Okay, let's end on a more positive note with some victories and displays of enduring spirit from the world of sports. First up, football or soccer, for some listeners, England's Lionesses.
Yes, big news from the Women's Euro 2025 tournament.
They've done it. They've secured their spot in the Euro 2025 final. It was a nail-biter against Italy in the semifinals, decided by a controversial penalty in extra time.
Controversial penalties are always part of the drama, aren't they? But a win's a win. Who scored the winner?
It was reportedly one of the super subs, players who came off the bench to make an impact. Chloe Kelly and Michelle Aguimang were both mentioned as playing pivotal roles in turning the game around after England went behind. A real comeback story.
That shows great team depth and resilience, doesn't it? Being able to bring on players who can change the game under pressure.
Absolutely. And what's also fascinating here and quite moving is the team's spirit off the pitch as well. They really rallied around their defender, Jess Carter.
What happened with Jess Carter?
She reportedly faced vile racial abuse online before the semifinal, but she played incredibly well, and afterwards, she credited the amazing support she received from the crowd and her teammates for giving her the courage to play through it.
That's powerful. The team standing together, the fans showing solidarity. It highlights how sport can sometimes transcend the game itself, doesn't it? Overcoming adversity that comes from outside the pitch.
It really does. That power of fan support and team unity can be incredibly uplifting in the face of something as ugly as racism. It makes their victory even more meaningful.
Truly inspiring. You can see why people were saying, is this a movie? That combination of comeback drama and off-field solidarity is pretty compelling stuff.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed for them in the final. And here's another sports story that just makes you shake your head in admiration, truly defying age. Tennis legend Venus Williams.
Venus. Still competing at the highest level. What's she done now?
At 45 years old, 45, she just won a singles match at the City Open tournament in Washington, D.C.
A WTA tour-level match win at 45. That's incredible longevity.
It makes her the oldest woman to win a singles match at this level since the legendary Martina Navratilova did it back in the day. It's a huge milestone.
Especially considering she had a long break from the game, didn't she?
Yeah, this marks a compelling return to competitive tennis for her after about a year-long hiatus due to injuries. It just showcases her enduring talent, her incredible dedication, and frankly is just inspiring to see.
It really is. The commitment required to maintain that level of fitness and skill for so long is immense.
Yeah.
And she's not the only 45-year-old making headlines for defying age in sports right now, is she?
No, over on the baseball diamond, pitcher Rich Hill.
Ah, Rich Hill, the journeyman's journeyman.
Exactly. He just tied a Major League Baseball record by pitching for his 14th different MLB team. 14th.
14 teams. That's incredible. He just keeps finding a way, doesn't he?
He does. And as he joins the Kansas City Royals, he also becomes the oldest active player currently in Major League Baseball. Also 45 years old.
So you've got Venus Williams in tennis, Rich Hill in baseball, both competing at the elite level at 45. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about longevity in professional sports?
It absolutely does. What does it take? The physical conditioning must be immense, the mental fortitude.
Unwavering dedication, relentless training, constantly adapting their games as their bodies age, competing against athletes who are often literally half their age. It's a remarkable testament to their passion for their sports and their sheer refusal to give up.
Truly inspiring examples of enduring spirit. And that, I think, brings us towards the end of another, whirlwind deep dive into the world's most compelling stories. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We certainly have. From those shifting geopolitical sands, the U.S.-Japan deal, Russia and Africa, the tensions with Poland, to the really complex ethical frontiers of AI, like that bee wearable.
Right. To the raw human realities of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the fight against corruption in Ukraine, the controversies around sports and inclusion.
And even remembering a music legend like Ozzy Osbourne and celebrating the enduring spirit of athletes like Venus Williams and Rich Hill, it's been quite a journey.
It really shows how deeply interconnected everything is, doesn't it? A trade deal here impacts stock markets there, and maybe even influences domestic politics somewhere else. A conflict in one region sends ripples across the globe, affecting everything from energy prices to campus protests.
Absolutely. And that's why critical thinking is just so essential when navigating this constant flood of information. You need to connect the dots, look for the underlying currents, consider multiple perspectives. We hope this deep dive has given you, our listeners, some valuable insights and angles to think about.
We hope so too. And as we often like to do, let's leave you with a final thought to mull over, something to chew on after we sign off.
Go for it.
Okay, thinking about that AI discussion, the news summaries, the energy consumption, and especially that bee wearable that records everything, here's the question. As artificial intelligence becomes ever more deeply integrated into our daily lives, how might the very definition of privacy evolve in the coming years?
That's a big one. What does privacy even mean when your words are constantly being recorded or your news is curated by an algorithm that knows your preferences perhaps better than you do?
Exactly. Will our expectations shift? Will we trade more privacy for convenience? And perhaps more importantly, how will we, as informed citizens, adapt to a world where our interactions, our data, our very thoughts perhaps, are increasingly monitored, analyzed, and potentially monetized or controlled?
It forces us to ask what safeguards we need, what regulations are appropriate, and what personal boundaries we want to maintain in this increasingly digitized and datafied world. The future of our data and our digital selves.
Yeah.
It really is a fascinating and profoundly critical conversation we all need to be having.
Couldn't agree more. It's a question worth actively considering as we collectively build whatever future comes next. We encourage you, as always, to keep exploring these topics, keep asking those big questions, stay informed,
And stay curious.
Until next time.